The equipment losses are horrendous. And all of this is for various reasons. Number one, Ukrainian forces are trained to fight like NATO. NATO, and especially the United States Armed Forces, are organized to refight some version of World War II. And we're up against a 21st century military establishment, which is organized very differently. And no one has been willing to accept this reality. And that's the biggest problem. Right now, you have persistent surveillance all over Ukraine, from space-based assets down to terrestrial assets that allow the Russians, through their intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance assets, to see everything in Ukraine all of the time. We have not disrupted their satellite-based capabilities for the simple reason that if we do that, they will destroy ours. We don't want to lose ours. So it's been a game. We try to race information to the Ukrainians as quickly as possible that they can exploit, but they're not organized to exploit it. The Russians are simply organized in a way that maximizes the value of their strike assets. Strike assets, artillery, rockets, missiles, drones, you name it. And these are very plentiful on the Russian side. The Russians have always appreciated the criticality of maintaining large quantities of strike weapons. They've got them in practically limitless numbers. You link those to all of these overhead surveillance capabilities, and then you have an automatic warfare capability. Something moves towards your lines, something seems to be threatening. A group of Ukrainians assemble, they bring in additional equipment, it's all detected, it's targeted, and then at a time and a place that is convenient for the Russians, they are destroyed. We failed to come to terms with this reality. People say, well, this is starting to look like World War I. Well, it's much worse than World War I. In World War I, people still didn't know what was happening behind the other person's trench line. Today, the Russians know exactly what's going on in Ukraine. And they've decided to simply sit and let the Ukrainians impale themselves. The question is, how much longer do they sit? And I can tell you there are large numbers of senior officers in Moscow, senior Russian officers, and a lot of Russian political leaders who are extremely uncomfortable with Putin's determination to, for the moment, wait. Putin has been very deliberate and very cautious. People have had it in Moscow. They say, come on, President Putin, it's time to end this thing. Crush these people, get it over with. And their point is very simple. If they don't do that, their concern is that we will be tempted to do something stupid, like intervene in Western Ukraine, or simply give the Ukrainians more capability, which is, of course, what we're doing. Now, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change the direction of the war. But the point is, if you do nothing for as long as the Russians have, in other words, simply sit behind your defenses, annihilate your enemy, as attractive as that is, people begin to wonder, well, I guess the Russians can't attack. What's wrong with them? Why don't they attack? Well, it's a deliberate decision by President Putin. He does not want a war with us. And he's afraid that if he rapidly advances on Kiev, closes the gap between his forces and the Dnieper River, that we will interpret that as threatening and suddenly intervene. I think he's wrong. I think our opportunity to intervene is over. And I think behind the scenes, the American military establishment and the other military establishments in NATO know they cannot defeat this capability which the Russians have perfected. We're still organized for a form of warfare that is anachronistic. It's called World War II.